The debate over whether the United States is planning to build a major military installation on the Israel-Gaza border has become one of the most politically charged and misunderstood developments in the region this year. A single set of media reports originating in Israel set off a wave of global speculation, denials from Washington, concerns from Arab states, accusations from regional rivals, and renewed anxiety about the future of Gaza's post-war landscape. Yet beneath the noise lies a complicated reality shaped by diplomacy, security calculations, and competing regional expectations. It all began when Israeli outlets reported that Washington was preparing to establish a large-scale American military base immediately adjacent to the Gaza perimeter. The reports described a facility costing around $500 million, capable of housing several thousand personnel and operating as a command headquarters for a future multinational stabilization force expected to enter Gaza under the terms of the ceasefire. Some media even framed it as the first permanent American military installation on Israeli soil, an unprecedented deepening of strategic ties at a moment of intense regional volatility. Those claims reverberated quickly. In Israel, the story was portrayed as evidence of strengthened U.S.-Israel cooperation and a long-term commitment to stabilizing the Gaza Strip. Across the Arab world, however, the reports generated alarm. Even the suggestion of an American base near Gaza risked undermining negotiations with Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and the Gulf states, all of whom have been considering roles in the stabilization force but remain deeply sensitive to perceptions of U.S. control or occupation. Iran seized the opportunity to cast the report as proof of American expansionism, immediately weaponizing the narrative for its own regional messaging. But in Washington, officials moved swiftly to shut the speculation down. The United States Central Command issued a direct and unambiguous statement to international media. Reports of the establishment of a U.S. military base near Gaza are inaccurate. To be clear, no U.S. troops will be deployed into Gaza, CENTCOM spokesman. Within hours, the White House reinforced the message. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt underscored that the president's position had been consistent throughout the conflict and its aftermath. The president has been very clear. He does not want to see boots on the ground in respect to what's happening in the Middle East. Karoline Leavitt. Those two statements, delivered with unusual clarity, were intended to extinguish the story. Yet, instead of ending the conversation, they revealed just how complicated the situation really is. The U.S. denial did not entirely align with the growing American presence in southern Israel, particularly the establishment of the Civil Military Coordination Center in the city of Kiryat Gat. It also did not fully explain why Israeli officials had allowed the initial reports to circulate unchallenged. Part of the confusion stems from timing. Only days before the media reports, the U.S. Navy issued a public request for information seeking designs for a self-sustaining deployment base capable of housing up to 10,000 personnel for 12 months. Although the document made no reference to Israel, Gaza or the Middle East, it quickly became folded into speculation about American intentions. Analysts suggested that the request may have been misinterpreted by Israeli sources or repurposed by political actors with their own agendas. But even more significant is Israel's strategic predicament. After months of war, political turmoil and domestic polarization, Israel's leadership faces a fundamental question: who will secure Gaza once the dust settles? The Israeli military has made it clear that it does not want to reoccupy the territory or assume long-term responsibility for it. Yet the security vacuum left by the collapse of Hamas's governance infrastructure cannot simply remain unfilled. Without a credible stabilization mechanism, Gaza risks descending into fragmentation, renewed extremism, or external takeover by regional militant groups. For Israel's security establishment, the presence of a substantial American logistical or coordination hub, even if located inside Israel rather than Gaza, would offer reassurance. An American presence, visible or not, signals deterrence to hostile actors and helps balance regional power dynamics. It also sends a message to domestic audiences that Israel is not navigating the post-war transition alone. This political incentive may explain why Israeli officials did not rush to quash the reports. Allowing the story to circulate may have been a deliberate test of public and international reactions. Meanwhile, the United States finds itself walking a diplomatic tightrope. Washington wants to maintain decisive influence over Gaza's stabilization while avoiding any steps that could be interpreted as military occupation or intervention. Domestic political realities also play a major role. The American public remains wary of foreign deployments, and the administration, still managing global crises from Eastern Europe to the Indo-Pacific, has no appetite for entanglement in a new conflict zone. That is why the establishment of the Civil-Military Coordination Center is considered a more politically manageable alternative. The CMCC, constructed in partnership with Israel, serves as the nerve center for aid coordination, ceasefire monitoring, and the logistical structuring of the International Stabilization Force. Approximately 200 American personnel are stationed there, performing non-combat functions. It integrates data from satellites, drones, and surveillance networks. It coordinates with Arab governments and NATO partners, and it allows the United States to shape the future of Gaza without placing thousands of American troops on the ground. The ISF itself remains the most important element of the post-war plan. It is envisioned as a multinational force with participation from Egypt, Qatar, the UAE, Turkey, Jordan, and select European states. While the US will play a major leadership role in planning, training, and intelligence coordination, it will not deploy combat units inside Gaza. That responsibility is expected to fall to Arab partners, whose involvement is crucial for the mission's legitimacy. Any hint of an American base risk, undermining the delicate negotiations needed to assemble such a force. Still, the initial media reports triggered strong reactions across the region. Arab governments issued private warnings that any large US military footprint near Gaza could destabilize the entire stabilization effort. Palestinian groups condemned the alleged plan as a new layer of US-Israeli dominance. Iran, always quick to leverage such narratives, framed the reports as proof of what it called American imperial designs. Even within Israel, opposition parties criticized what they saw as over-dependence on Washington. Despite the denials from Washington, the story continues to matter because it touches on unresolved geopolitical realities. Gaza cannot secure or govern itself in the short term. Israel does not intend to take control again. Arab states will not assume full responsibility without American leadership. And the United States wants influence without entanglement. Something must fill the gap, and that something will inevitably require infrastructure, coordination, and multinational presence. Even without a full-scale base, the US footprint in southern Israel is growing. The CMCC is expanding. Additional support facilities are being evaluated. New intelligence and logistical hubs are being linked to Gaza's humanitarian corridors. While none of this constitutes a military base in the traditional sense, it does reflect a broader reality. The United States is deeply embedded in shaping Gaza's future, even as it insists that American forces will not enter the territory. This balance between influence and restraint defines the entire US strategy. Washington wants to prevent an extremist resurgence in Gaza, avoid escalation with Iran, reassure Israel's security establishment, and maintain regional partnerships, all while keeping American ground forces out of direct conflict. It is a delicate calculus, and public narratives about military bases can destabilize the diplomacy required to sustain it. For Israel, the emerging US presence represents a critical pillar of post-war planning. With political divisions, security concerns, and governance challenges mounting, Jerusalem sees American leadership as indispensable. But Israel also knows that pushing too aggressively for a US military footprint could backfire, jeopardizing the very international support it needs. For the United States, the challenge is even greater. Washington must convince Israel that it remains fully committed to Gaza's stabilization, while reassuring Arab partners that it is not establishing a permanent military presence. It must demonstrate strength to deter adversaries without provoking accusations of occupation, and it must manage expectations in a region where every move carries outsized symbolic weight. The controversy over the alleged base illustrates how sensitive the geopolitical environment has become. The United States and Israel may ultimately share strategic goals in Gaza, but their political environments, regional relationships, and risk calculations are vastly different. This creates fertile ground for misinterpretations, leaks, speculation, and contradictory messaging. What remains clear is that American involvement in Gaza stabilization will continue to deepen, not through combat deployments, but through coordination, planning, and support infrastructure located within Israel. The CMCC and related hubs may evolve, expand, or be replicated, but they will remain distinct from the concept of a permanent, large-scale base. Washington will avoid anything resembling occupation optics, even as it quietly shapes the region's security architecture. The debate will also continue because the questions at stake are far from resolved. What security force will replace Hamas? How will Gaza's borders be managed? Who will oversee reconstruction? How will ceasefire compliance be enforced? What happens if regional powers disagree? And what role will Washington ultimately play in shaping outcomes during the long, fragile transition ahead? In many ways, the story of the US base captures the essence of the post-war moment: confusion, ambition, mistrust, political maneuvering, and strategic recalculation. It shows how a single report can expose the fault lines among allies, adversaries, and partners. It reveals the competing pressures on the United States as it attempts to guide regional outcomes without becoming directly entangled. It highlights Israel's reliance on American support at a moment of profound uncertainty, and it underscores the complications facing Arab states as they weigh participation in a mission they cannot fully endorse or fully reject. The United States may not be building a massive base on the Gaza border, but it is constructing something more complex, a new security architecture for a region caught between war and reconstruction. Its presence will not be defined by thousands of troops or permanent installations, but by an intricate web of planning cells, liaison units, intelligence links, humanitarian corridors, and multinational coordination hubs. In this sense, the initial media reports were not entirely wrong. They simply misunderstood the nature of American involvement. And so, even after the denials, the controversy remains instructive. It reflects a geopolitical transition still in motion, a region searching for stability, and a superpower navigating the narrow path between leadership and restraint. The next phase of Gaza's future will be shaped not by a military base, but by decisions now being made quietly in Washington, Jerusalem, Cairo, Doha, and Ankara, decisions that will determine whether the ceasefire evolves into lasting stability or dissolves into another cycle of conflict.